guys, so I thought for this portion of the video I would explain my process with painting this portrait and just kind of how I work with gouache. So yeah, I hope you enjoy this segment. So you can kind of just see here I'm just painting the base layer, and I'm pretty much not super confident with gouache, but I do like how it lays on the paper, like the opaqueness of the medium. So if you guys have seen my previous videos, you'll know that I actually tend to use a lot of watercolor, and I've kind of been not drawing that much recently, or I guess I haven't been painting much either. So I've been a little bit rusty, so you'll see in the later phases of this painting I struggle a lot, but I'll leave that part till later. For now I'm just kind of building up the layers, and I'm not really sure how other people maybe who are more used to the medium than me might deal with it, but I think for me I started with very light layers, which I think now in hindsight I think maybe I should have done a bit more darker layers. I think that would have helped the paper not struggle as much with the paint, because as you'll see later I do struggle a bit with making sure the colors lay on, and especially the way they dry with the thinner layers is a lot different than how I originally applied them. So it was a bit of a struggle, but honestly I did try my best, and it was a while since I used these paints, so yeah, I'm not completely upset with how it turned out, but I do wish I could have used the paint a bit better. So here you can just see me blocking out the basic colors, nothing too crazy. If you noticed, I did try to mix different kinds of colors, hoping that they would show through at the end, but as you'll see later, because the paint is more opaque, it doesn't really show through that well, so I guess that's something else I should have planned for. For those of you wondering, the supplies I'm using is the Himi Gouache set, and that includes the brushes as well. So I've had this gouache set for maybe over a year or two. I don't use gouache that often, but I do use it occasionally when I want to achieve a more opaque look, or when I'm using it for photo studies or just doing a more realistic kind of style, since my normal style is much more cartoony. So yeah. Here you can see I'm trying to really mix the layers together, but it's not working that well, especially a lot of what I'm doing right now with the skin won't show up in the end, and I think that's one of the things that I'm not that good at when it comes to using paint, and maybe why I prefer watercolor despite not necessarily liking the grainy effect and how it lays on the paper. So I think simply because I prefer the opaque look of mediums, I have tried to use acrylic before in the past, but I really don't like how precise you need to be with the colors, in the sense of you need to know intentionally what colors you're using in order to create a sort of gradient effect. And you can't really mix acrylic, as far as I know, unless you add some sort of medium, but I haven't tried that, so I've kind of just used it normally, and I'm not a huge fan. With gouache, it's a little bit more forgiving, but you have to make sure you know how you're layering it, and I guess in some ways you can kind of like do too much opaque layers, which kind of hides all the gradients you create underneath. So I guess for someone like me who's pretty used to watercolor and having everything show through, it was a bit difficult to get it to come out the way I wanted to. It's not the first time I'm using these paints, but I've also never really gotten used to painting with other mediums. I think just because of the way I naturally learned to paint, more aligned with, watercolor techniques. So I do definitely think it's something I need to work on, and practicing these kinds of paintings definitely does help me out, even if the end result isn't always that great. And so now you can see I'm trying to add a bit of extra color onto the face with some blues, but as you'll see later as well, a lot of this doesn't end up showing through to the very end. So that's also one of, I guess, my struggles with this medium. If anyone has any advice, I would love to hear it in the comments, or just anyone more experienced with the medium than me, maybe with like more traditional paints, because it's not something I'm very used to. That said, I do think I want to practice more traditional painting because I do think it'll help me improve a lot, especially with choosing the right colors and not having to rely on building up layers like in watercolor. So I will hopefully try out some new paints, because with the current set I have of the Himi Gouache, it's kind of very old now, so a lot of the paint is cracked, and it is kind of annoying having to reactivate it every time I want to use the paint. So that kind of makes it so that I end up painting less, or I end up using a medium that's a lot more easier. So hopefully in a future video I will show myself using those paints. I think one thing with my art that I have seen improvement over the years but is still kind of not quite there, especially with painting, is how clean my work looks, or I guess how clean my lines and shapes are. So I feel like I still have a long way to go in producing that kind of, I'm not really sure how you say it, but kind of like digital look, as if your traditional works are like digital art because it's like so clean. So I still think I have quite a while until I get to that very clean professional look. So until then, I'll keep practicing. And so here with the shirt, you can just see me mixing a lot of colors together. And again, I do think some of this does show through in the end, but I do think it's not necessarily to the extent that I want it to, compared to maybe when I use watercolor, or especially in my digital artworks, which I don't really post on this channel, but hopefully in the future I can make a digital art video. I think that will be quite fun as long as I can figure out the camera setup. Actually, talking about the camera setup, you'll see that for the most part of this video, it's pretty much filmed at this sort of awkward angle, and so I apologize for that. I think that was just the best way I could set up the camera to kind of capture the whole thing, but later I realized, and you'll see near the end of the video, that actually I can kind of film in a straight forward, or rather straight downward shot. So I think for future videos I will try that angle, or maybe multiple angles, and see how that works as well. I think another thing I'm also trying out is the combination of real-time footage and sped up footage. So in my other video I used a lot more real-time footage, and in this one, because it is a painting and I feel like a lot of it looks, I don't know, maybe a little repetitive. I did speed up a lot of the footage here, so you'll see mostly sped up footage, and I guess I just kind of wanted to try something different with my editing style and yeah, see what kind of thing sticks in the future. So for this section of the video, I think you can probably tell that it is a bit blurry. Again, I apologize for that. I think with the camera, sometimes because I pause in between recordings, the footage tends to like zoom in the wrong spots. So I am kind of considering maybe going back to film on my phone, though the issue with that was that I usually didn't have enough storage, so I couldn't really do real-time footage, which is actually why most of my early videos were speed paints or digital speed paints, and I only had one traditional speed paint up on my channel back several years ago, but that speed paint was like a time-lapse video because I couldn't fit like normal recording session onto my phone. So getting this new camera has been nice because it does help me kind of film longer videos, but at the same time it's also a struggle with the angle and also getting the camera to focus properly. And so now you can see that there's a lot of changes to the face, so that's kind of a big jump in terms of process. Again, I apologize for this. I did not record this part specifically because I was really struggling with the face. Again, gouache is not my best medium, so I actually went in with colored pencils, and that's why you can see so much texture on the face, because I used colored pencils to fix this issue, but at the same time, because I went over the paint and it really teared out the paper, you can see it kind of looks grainy. So here I'm just adding more highlights and kind of going over with colored pencil to add some final details. I think that's another thing about recording yourself doing art. I don't know if it's just me, but I usually feel a lot more pressure when the camera is recording, or I guess it's more difficult for me to fully focus sometimes because I'm worried that the camera is out of focus or that it's not recording the video properly. And I think it's maybe something you just need to get used to with time, and I guess making it a habit. So I'm still kind of early into that phase, so hopefully I'll get more comfortable filming myself drawing in the future. But yeah, for now, you're gonna get this sort of cut up process. But hopefully I'll be able to figure it out soon and you can see my full process for my illustrations. So I think the reason here why I went in with more colored pencil and adding extra highlights was because the face was so textured. I kind of wanted to bring in the texture in other parts of the drawing. It's not perfect, but I think it does kind of help balance it out, and I think maybe it gives it a more like chalk pastel kind of feeling. I'm not sure, but I tried my best with the face, especially because the texture is so visible. So hopefully the highlights in the hair and the extra bits of color I'm adding on the jacket helped out, maybe? I'm not sure. And yeah, overall, I just think using colored pencils gives me a lot more control over the piece. so you can kind of see it helped add the contrast as well as the Posca pen with the highlights. I think overall brought the piece together, and I think kind of saved it in the end. And yeah, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and please stay tuned for more videos in the future. I hope to see you in another video. Bye!